Hey guys, Avid Assistant here. So this is going to be the first in a series of videos just looking at Avid basics. This will be useful for people new to Avid editing, people crossing over from another NLE like Premiere, or if you just haven't used the software in quite a while and you're just looking for a little bit of a refresher. It's the kind of thing that's been requested quite a few times, so here we are. So first off, in this video, we're going to just look at a basic overview of Avid, just a layout, where things are, opening bins, setting up a project, where you can find your tools, and that kind of stuff. So let's get started. Right, so when you first launch the software, this is what you'll be greeted with. This is our project selection page. Now, there's actually two tabs on this these days where you can switch between selecting a project, which is a default you'll see up here, select project, you can see all your projects here. Or there's the What's New tab, which is a really useful way of keeping track of what features are new and what version they were released in. So you can look here and sort of cycle back of all the newly added features all the way back to 2019.6, I believe, which is when they revamped the UI and, introduced the new Avid. And I say it like that because it's been 4 years now. It's not really that new. Right, now, hopping back to our project selection page, you can see all your projects listed here. We also have a number of columns of information about each project, like the resolution, frame rate, color space, raster dimensions, yada yada. We can right click here and we can add additional columns like a poster frame. We can hide columns like frame rate and raster dimensions since they are already here under project type, so I'm going to get rid of those. Stereoscopic, to do with 3D. I've never ever had a 3D project in Avid, so I'll get rid of that one as well. It's just taking up space. And there we go. Over on the right here, we've got a few other controls. We can set the font of our text here. It's currently by default set to 10, so I'm going to make that a bit bigger. I'm going to go 14. There we go. Nice and easier to read. And we can also switch this to a thumbnail view if you want to view your projects this way. If you're more of a visual person, this might be helpful to you. But by default, Avid won't pick a frame. You'll have to set one. For a project. By default, Avid's not going to do it. It's going to just show this Avid logo here, and you can see that I don't often do that in terms of setting a poster frame, just because I'm used to viewing these in text form. But anyway, that's where we can select our projects. Just above there, we have two drop-down menus. You see, the one on the bottom is the location where we're looking for our projects. By default, it's probably going to look in a public shared folder within your home directory, and then a documents folder within that, and it'll put shared Avid projects, and I'll also put one in your documents folder. One of those two is the default. I always change it to a cloud sync folder, just for backup reasons. But yeah, if you have a folder with a bunch of Avid projects that's on an external drive or something like that, just click the little folder here, and then you'll be able to go and find that folder. You'll also be able to click directly on the containing folder of a project, and if you hit open there, it's just going to jump straight into that project. That's how you navigate that. And the drop-down menu above there is what's known as your user profile. So this is your user settings for Avid Media Composer, all your customization options, your custom map keyboard, your layouts, everything. There will always be a user profile selected, and I've got a number of them here. Some of these I've created for videos. Some of them, have been created for specific releases. I do create new user settings every time there's a new version of Avid. It is a good habit to get into since it's one that can confuse Avid. If you try to use the same user settings across multiple versions, it can lead to some buggy behavior. I've mentioned this a few times in other videos. So it's definitely one to, so it's definitely a good practice to be in. But if you have multiple users using the same Avid, that's where you'll flick back and forth between your different users. Now the last main thing to show here is these two buttons up here, Projects and New Project. So we're currently in the Projects window. We can go to the New Project area to create a new project. Now this is fairly self-explanatory. I'm not going to do a detailed explanation of all these options. I've done that in another video in the AE100 series. If you'd like, you can go check that out. But the long and short of it is that here you're going to set your name of your project, your resolution, your frame rate, color space, set up what your project's going to be, and then hit create, and it's going to create a fresh new project. Now in Avid Media Composer, when you set up your resolution and frame rate for your project, unlike Premiere, where you can have different timelines at different frame rates within one containing project, Avid will have one resolution and frame rate for an entire project. So all of your sequences are going to be at that frame rate. And you know, that's what you're going to be using going forward. So the best practice is to set this to whatever your delivery format is going to be. Now, if you're working in offline Avid editing, which is probably Avid's main marketplace, then almost always this is going to be 1080p. And it's just going to be the frame rate of, if your TV, whatever your region is, be 25p for PAL in the UK, maybe 2398 in the States, or 30p. Or if you're working on film, odds are it'll be 24. You can, of course, use much higher res material within your project. You can have 6, 8, however many K's resolution of material within a 1080p project for zooming and panning and for whatever else. But having a 1080p project is probably the most common setup for Avid. So I'll set one up quickly here. I'll just call it Avid example and the project name. And I'll go 1080 30. And that's as much customization as I'm going to do. Now, there is this version up here as well that was added fairly recently in one of the new versions, and all it means is it's similar to options that are in like the likes of Final Cut 10, where it's just going to set these options based on the resolution and frame rate of whatever's the first clip you do ingest, which I don't particularly like because the resolution of a lot of clips that I bring in are not my working resolution. So it doesn't really work for me, but if you're doing smaller stuff and you're just wanting to throw material in there and get started really quick, if that works for you, you can know that that option is there. But it'll only take you an extra few seconds to set up your project to a specific resolution and frame rate. Okay, I don't know how much I've cut this down to at this point, but I've just been talking for a very long tangent for about 10 minutes on something that should have taken 30 seconds. So I'm going to hit create and jump into this project. Right, and here we are. This is us inside a project in Avid Media Composer. Now, this is a custom workspace layout from my user settings. So I'm going to create a fresh user just now and sort of switch it up to what you're more likely to see when you first log in. And yeah, let's take a look at that. So I'm going to bring up my settings, file settings, and then here we can see our user profile is here. It's under the user tab, and I'll create a drop down menu here and go create user profile. And now in the newer versions, when you do this, it'll ask, do you want Media Composer default or transitioning from Adobe Premiere Pro? Now, I'm not going to use this option, but I will tell you what it does. I've demonstrated in another video where all it's going to do is it's just going to create a workspace with these windows formatted in the same place and position as the counterpart tools appear in Premiere. Now, if I'm going to use another NLE, I don't recommend trying to make it work like the one you're used to. For me as an Avid editor, if I have to use Premiere, I'm not going to try to make Premiere work like Avid. I'll learn Premiere and try to use the advantages of what Premiere can offer. So I'd recommend doing the same thing with Avid here. I'd set up with Media Composer default and sort of get on board with the Avid way of thinking and the Avid logic of where things are and where they're located. You'll have a much easier time of it if you don't compare it to other applications. It's the same with Premiere and Final Cut 10, Resolve, whatever else. If I'm using something else, I'm using that. I won't compare it to Avid, which might be the reason why I rarely ever use anything else. But let's give this profile a name. We'll call it well, Avid Basics. I'll hit OK. And it looks like this is the default color scheme. You get the dark version these days. Okay, default used to look a little bit lighter than that, but that's fine. Now, as you can see, the only thing available to me right now is this bin, and it's an empty bin. That's all you can see. That is not the default Avid user layout. This is because my Avid is spread across 2 monitors right now, and the other panels, as Avid refers to them, are on the other monitor. So I'm going to bring them over onto this one so as you can see. And the way to do this is over here on the side of the panels, you'll see there's a purple highlighted section that has the name of it. So this is my bins, so it says bins. If I click and drag that away, then I can dock it somewhere else. So I'm going to grab the timeline from my other monitor. I'm going to click and drag over here. And then you'll see I get these green highlighted points show up. So each of these green areas is an area that I can dock my timeline to. So I'm going to put it on the bottom because quite often your timeline will go on along the bottom. And there we are. There's my timeline. Now, just so that you can see on this monitor, just how I did that was just grabbing it from there and pulling it away. And I'll just grab the last one over here, which is the composer window. And I'll dock that here. So if you just created a brand new project and you just opened Avid for the first time with fresh new user settings and you only had one monitor, this should be roughly what you're looking at right now. So this will be your starting point of giving you the quick tour of Avid and where things are. So Avid's new layout and the redesigned UI that we talked about before that was introduced in 2019 introduced this idea of docked panels. Now you don't have to work this way, or if you're a historical Avid user and you like to have your windows floating around, you can go back to that by going Windows, float all panels, or even float just an individual panel, by clicking and dragging it out, and then you can have that as a window on its own. I'm not going to talk too much about that though, because I like to explain Avid in its current iteration, and the layout and the logic of where they're currently going for. Because I think once you spend a few days getting used to it, this can be a really nice way of working. So right now we have 3 of these panels up. We have our bins, which is up here, which is made up of a bin in here and what we call a sidebar, which is all the bins in your project. This is your project overview. Here I can create folders with a right click or from this drop down menu, called more bins. And I can create another bin in here called, say, imports. And then you can see as I create these bins, they pop up tabbed in this area to the right. So this is known as a bin container. This whole panel is a bin container and made up of a sidebar on the left, which we can completely close by dragging the bins over it, and the bins tabbed on the right. We can have as many bin containers as we like. We can create new bin containers, and we could have this whole panel again underneath it. If you wanted to have docked panels but with multiple of them open, you can completely change this layout to work however you like. But that is the basic explanation of the bins panel. So there we go. I've created just a few bins as an example, and now I'm going to close the sidebar for some space. There we go. 1, 2, 3 bins. That'll do us just now. You get the idea. If you end up with a whole heap of these bins, by the way, and the writing becomes too small for you to read the titles and the tabs, there's this little drop down menu here with an arrow, so you can jump straight to any of the current bins that are open. But moving on from that panel for a second, over here we've got the composer window. The composer window is made up of 2 viewers. The one on the left is what we call the source, and the one on the right is what we call the record. Now the record is basically your timeline. Your record is the pictures that you're building, the edit you're building, and the source is your source. Any source clips that you load into it, whether they be titles, video clips, music, audio sound effects, whatever they be, they'll be loaded into the source monitor before being edited into the record one, into the timeline. And this is kind of a fundamental concept that is used in most non-linear editors, including Premiere, DaVinci Resolve, Final Cut 10 tries to be different. It has a multi-use single viewer, but the dual source recorded monitor system is not unique to Avid. It's very common in editing, and that's what your composer window is made up of. And then your last panel is your timeline, which is down here. And I think to make some of this stuff a bit easier to explain, let's bring in some material and lay it on the timeline, and that'll make it a bit easier to explain some of this stuff. So to import material in Avid, you select your bin you want it to go into, and then we're going to go File, Input, Source Browser. Now all of these functions that I'm grabbing from the menu bar up here, you can map to keys. In my own user settings, I do have this map to key, but again, if you're new to Avid, this is just me showing you the options. So if you come down to the File menu, Import, Source Browser, this is Avid's ingesting tool. Now I have multiple videos covering getting stuff into Avid and the differences between linking and importing, but for the purposes of this video and for just explaining getting stuff in, we're going to use link, which is just going to be referencing the material as it exists outside of the application. It's not going to be transcoding or changing the material or moving it in any way. We're just going to link to it where it is. Right, so here's my source folder for all of my material for my Avid Proxy workflow video, which is a good watch that goes through creating proxies in Avid Media Composer, linking them, relinking to the source later on, and just in general talking about how Avid deals with proxies. And that one should, I think, also look at the difference between linking and importing as well. So I'm going to just link in the source recordings from there, the screen recordings, and we'll use that just as our example media. So once we've selected it here, I'm just going to hit link, and you can see from our target bin selected there is imports. Now by default, this is always just going to be the bin that you have open when you have source browser open, but you can set this to another bin that's currently open, or you can tell it to create a bin based on the containing folder, or create a new bin and put the stuff in it. So you have a few options there. But by default, the one you've currently got selected will work 9 times out of 10. Now I'm going to close source browser, and we have this material here. So you can see, like I spoke about before, once I double click any of these clips and load them up, they're going to load in my source monitor. And for example, if I was to go to another bin and create a timeline with the timeline new sequence, there we go. We could also do Shift Command N, which would do the same thing there. But again, just trying to show you where all these tools are. Then once I have my sequence and I have something in my source monitor, I can cut that into my sequence. I'm just going to use this overwrite function here for now. And now that's on my timeline, and that's being looked at in the record monitor. So those are your two monitors for editing. You will prep your clips in your source monitor and you'll cut them onto your timeline, and then you can view your timeline and edit it and play stuff back in the record monitor. Right, now that has got some material in. We've had a look at our default panels of our bins, our composer, and our timeline. Now let's take a look at some other Avid tools. And the best way to do that is to look through our workspaces. And the best way to do that is to start from the bottom. I'm going to go audio and then go up the way. So if I just click on audio, you can see it reconfigures my tools and the layout to give me some tools that are suited towards audio tasks. So rebalancing your levels, keyframing audio, adding in some effects maybe, just in general doing your audio work. So it's changed my composer to a single monitor. It's got rid of the source. There is a button up here that we can toggle between source and record if we wish. But in general, it's doing this so that you can slide this panel around to give yourself more room for other ones. So for example, your audio mixer, which I've got down here for some reason, I'm going to move up here next to the audio tool, which is, and the audio tool is basically my meters. So for example, if I was to play some sound with audio,
your proxies,
like here,
why don't we take a look at what this will look at?
You can see my meters going. They're just there for reference. So I'm going to grab my audio mixer, and I'm going to hold Alt. So I'm going to hold Option or Alt if you're on Windows. And what this allows to do is, instead of snapping and creating a new space in the workspace, I can tab this into one of the existing spaces. So I'm going to tab it in with the audio tool here. And now you can see within the same space that was already reserved in the current layout, I can toggle between my audio mixer and the audio tool. And then that way, as I add tracks on my timeline, you know, I still have space in the audio mixer up here. And it'll also give me some, you know, a rough visualization of levels. But if I want, the audio tool is there if I like. I can, and I could always bring that up and put it in the middle here and just make it really small if I wanted to, if I still wanted that visual reference.
And then
like so. So to look through our tools that we currently have open here, our audio tool we just spoke about, it's for reference. It's just for looking at a reference of our levels. Our audio mixer is for raising and lowering levels. It's a mixer. Down here is just our bins again, and down here is our timeline. There are plenty more audio tools within Avid Media Composer once you get into it. For this initial video, I'm just covering a layout, going through the workspaces. Feel free to have a play with these, but I'll be going into a deeper dive of different things throughout different videos. There will be one specifically on audio. I'll do one on effects. These workspaces give a good sort of overview of, you know, topics to cover. So moving on from audio is the effects workspace. And you can see here we have our source and record monitors. And we've got our timeline and we've got our bins, all as usual. But now up here we have our effect editor and our effect palette. So our effect palette is where you will find all your effects. They're all in categories here on the left. As you select a category, all the effects in that category will appear on the right. The filters tab is where all your picture effects are, followed by a transitions tab, you know, where you can get a whole bunch of different transitions to use. Audio tracks, track wide effects, and audio clip effects. Now, I tend to only ever go to the effect palette for the filters tab. I don't really jump here for any of the other three. There's other ways of adding those in. But again, that's something that I'll go into a bit deeper in another video. For now, I'd say the main thing to mention is that if you're coming from something like Resolve or Premiere and you're looking at Avid, then your effects within Avid Media Composer are going to be considerably limited in comparison to what you might be used to. Especially since there aren't as many free add-ins or plugins. Depending on what level you're using Avid for, you know, the effects available to you won't quite be so punchy. Now, if you're in a facility, the odds are they may have something like Boris Continuum or Boris Sapphire installed, which does add a whole suite of very powerful effects for you to play with. And there are other paid platforms that you can add plugin effects for that will make a difference. But in general, at least in my experience, a lot of the Avid effects that I use are primarily for doing offline effects. It's to get the point across, but it's not what it's going to look like in the end. It's just to show. It's just to communicate as best we can the effect, how it should look like. But anyway, sorry for another tangent. That's your effect palette, and the other tabbed tool that we have here, the effect editor, is where you're going to edit all your effects. It's where you're going to, you know, make any changes. So if I drag on an effect here, like 3D warp, which is your, you know, Swiss Army knife of effects in Avid, and I'm hovering over this clip, and I go to my effect editor. Here are all our switches and controls to do with 3D warp. This is where we'll make all our changes, where we can, you know, zoom in and reframe. We can crop, you know, do some keying, spill suppression, defocusing, perspective changes, rotation, all that good stuff. Now, by default in Avid, another thing to note as well that's different from the likes of Premiere and Final Cut and whatnot is that you will have to add an effect before you can change the sizing or, you know, change the speed of a particular clip. You won't be able to manipulate a clip until there's an effect put on it on the timeline. Now, there is one circumstance where that's not the case, which is when you have footage that's at a resolution that's not the default for your project, like this, where you can see there's already an icon there on the clip. And that, if we open it up in the effect editor, will give us controls for what we call frame flex, which is Avid's default way of manipulating footage that's of a different frame size than the raster that you're working in. And it's quite common now for people to use this for keyframed moves and resizes, reframes. But by default, historically, you would have used 3D warp for something like that, or resize in the effect palette. And for respeeds, if you want to change the time of something, also in the effect palette, down the bottom, we have a category called time warp, where there's a number of preset effects here to do with manipulating time. If stuff like freeze frame, if I add that in, it's just going to freeze it at the first frame, I believe. And then you can roll the clip out as long as you need, and it'll just maintain that frame. We can reverse the motion to play it backwards. Trim to fill, if I drop that on and then drag the clip out, it's just going to retime it to fit the length of whatever runtime I drag it to. But the most common one we're going to use here is time warp, which is just the default speed effect. And once that's on there, then you'll need to open up a tool called the motion effect editor, which I highly recommend also dragging into your effects workspace, and then coming over to the arrow at your effects workspace, clicking that and going save current, and saving that in, since it's the effect editor for anything time related, and you'll need that as well. So to change the timing of this here, we're just going to click this little speed graph. There's two icons up here. So I'm just going to click the speed graph of the little man running. And then down here where it says 100, that's 100% speed, so it's a normal speed. If we change this to any number, it's going to change the speed. So if I change it to 600, we're now at 600%. So you can see here, if I play this down, it's now moving very fast because we're at 600%. And we can add keyframes and manipulate this and change it in all kinds of ways. But again, I'll save that for another video. For now, I'm just going to get rid of that effect off of that clip. So there's a rough quick look around at our effects. Lastly, our last workspace here is color. So if I click that, we get our color correction panel segmented in the middle between our timeline and our viewers. And you can see our viewers changes up here to show the previous clip, the current clip, and the next clip. So I'll add in some clips just to show you what that'll look like. So if I'm playing around on this clip here, we can see that is in our current viewer as we move it around. But we also get a reference of what our previous clip and our next clip will look like, which is particularly useful for color correction if you're trying to balance the color of a particular clip with the overall color palette of a scene. So if you can see what the clip before and after looks like, it'll make it a lot easier to balance those and get that viewing. But you can change this viewer and customize. Again, the customization options within Avid are very extensive. You can change the layout to look however you like, including even if you don't need your previous or next, you can change this to show your scopes. So for example, if you want RGB histogram, I'll use, and skimming through this. Now this is a screen record, so it's not the best example. Here I threw onto the timeline a quick clip from my wedding, and you can see we get a bit more information there in the RGB histogram. But there is other graphs that we can use here as well, which will give you better information. And then if you're on, and if you do have your scopes up here, as you scroll along the timeline of your scope, that will also move along that clip here in your viewers as well. So you can skim on either one. And you can change these to however you like to have, whichever scope up is most suited to the task and what's working for you. Or you can actually have them all up if you have enough screen real estate and you can make that big enough. But that's your viewers. And then underneath here, we have our color correction panel where we have a whole bunch of different color tools here. Now, the amount of tools here will vary depending if you have Avid Symphony installed, which is bundled with the Avid Ultimate package. If it's the basic Avid standard license, you may not have all of the functions here, but you will have, say, your color curves, where you'll be able to, brighten and darken and change contrast and, add more of a certain color or not, and whatnot. You'll have, color tools here regardless. But with Symfony installed, you'll be able to do like a proper grade pass in Avid online work and whatnot. And I'm not going to go into too details of this either, not just right now. I don't know about later because I'm not a colorist and I don't tend to use this often. I will cover it a bit in a later video where I'll talk about the tools as an editor that I do use and how they're useful to me and how to use them. But that's enough about color. I won't go into that too much more just now. So by default, you've got edit, color, effects, and audio. Now, you can make as many of these as you like. There's an arrow down here. If you click, you will get the option to save your current workspace. You can restore it to save. So if you've made some changes, but you hadn't saved them yet, and you don't like the way you've changed it, you can revert it to its save status. You can restore the current workspace to its default setting if it's one of the main four. And you can create a new workspace. So if I wanted to create a new one with, say, Avid Basics, and maybe in this workspace, I, don't want to be seeing my bins all the time. I want larger viewers. Then I could drag my bins, dock it in with my composer, and there I have a much larger composer window. I would recommend definitely having your own or highly customizing the edit one, just so that you have all of the tools that you use most frequently available to you. And then you can just sort of slide them out from places or have them tabbed from places. I admit I'm using it more and more now, but when this paneled interface was first introduced, I almost never left the edit workspace because I had customized it and just docked so many tools that I basically had everything available to me at any given time just by sliding it out or, unlocking it from one of the tabs, and I never changed workspaces. I'm doing it more now and sort of getting on board with, the whole idea of having a completely different layout for different tasks, and I'm starting to really like it, so I would recommend it. But now, as the last thing we do before we wrap up the video, let's look at settings. Since this will be where you compose your Avid and your user profile and how you like things to be. So I'll go back to File, Settings, which you can open up on Windows with Control-Shift-Equals, or on a Mac with just Command comma. You can bring this up very quickly. So taking a look at the settings window, you can see here we have 4 tabs. We have Format, which is the basic formatting of this current project. There's not quite a lot of options there, but there is some. We have our project settings, which would be any settings unique to this particular project, user settings, and site settings. So jumping over to project just now, the main one that I'm going to mention here is media creation. Now this is such an important setting in Windows that you can actually get to it straight from the file menu as well by going File, Media Creation Settings, or by going Command 5, Control 5 on Windows. You can jump straight to this as well. And what this is going to do is set by default what resolution your titles, importing, transcodes, etc. are made at when you transcode something or render something, whatever else, what resolution you use, what codec you use, and what media drive they get stored to. So this should be one of the first things you do when you set up any Avid project is jump up to here and make sure that these are all going to a good place. So by default, I'm always going to use DNX LB, and then Falcon Bay is my RAID, so I always want it to go there. And then I'll just hit apply to all, and then cycle through them and make sure that that's what they all say. Yep, looking good. This is a very important one to have set correctly, so you don't have media bloating up your system drive or going to, a flash drive or some really slow USB drive, and then you're wondering why your exports or your renders are taking so long. Make sure they're going to the correct drive. So that's your media creation settings. There are other stuff to look at in project, but I'm going to move on for now to your user settings, which is where the bulk of your settings are. There are so many different things to configure here and look at. We're going to start up at the top here with bin, and here we'll get options to do with our bins. For example, how often Avid will save a bin in your autosave. I think by default here this is every 15 minutes. I like to set it to be more like every 3 minutes. And I'll force an autosave, say, every 8 minutes. And inactivity period, yeah, I'll set it to 50, leave that at 15 seconds. You know, when you create a new bin or opening a closed bin, you know, where that bin goes, does it float into a new bin container or does it go into the active one? And to do with your icons and your frames and stuff there. So this is one that's definitely worth, you know, having a look through the settings and tweaking. But I would definitely have a look at your autosave there and make sure that that's set to a little sooner, because all editors know we can get a lot of work done in 15 minutes when you're on a roll. And if you've lost 15 minutes work at the wrong time, that can be a pain. So I'm going to OK out of that. Your bin views are different layouts within your bins. That we'll take a look at another video. But the basic idea of this is that your bins can have completely different layouts and looks, you know, with frames, scripts, comments, text, you know, which columns are up. There's many different ways a bin can be laid out for different purposes or to tailor to different ways of cutting. Continuing down, there's a whole bunch of different settings here that you can configure in like composer settings, you know, your controller. Email, you can set Avid to email you when it completes a task like a render or an export. It's a very useful setting. It's been there as long as I can remember. It works great. You get a nice little email once it's done. So you can step away from the machine. You don't have to, you know, physically watch it finish. Full screen playback, where that's going to go. Your different export presets will appear here. Interface is how your Avid looks. So here you can customize, you know, you can make it lighter, you know, ranging from the dark default that's here all the way through to very bright like this. This hurts my eyes. I don't like this. I kind of like more in the middle, like slightly dark. And I like my highlight color to be amber. And then, you know, we're looking a bit different already. But through the interface settings, you can set, you know, your default font size, you know, in all bins. You can override the font size of any bin. So if a bin's been saved with a specific font size of 12 by another editor and that's too small for you, you can set your settings to override that when you open it and make it larger. You know, your default font. Elsewhere, your viewers, the color background of all of these different panels. So for example, I can change my timeline background to be, I'll make it purple, then hit apply. You can see that moves to purple there. You know, your general interface settings are just configuring the interface and how it looks for you. Whole bunch to explore there. Now, I won't go through everything and all the rest. There's a whole lot of settings I recommend you have a good look through and explore here. The main one that I want to show you here is your keyboard. Here's the default keyboards that come with Media Composer. There's a few different English ones here that are just the same keyboard. I'm not quite sure why. But nowadays we also get the default layout of Premiere and Resolve that we can toggle on as our edit keyboard as well. So if you're really used to those functions and that layout, you can use that. Like if you're a Premiere editor who only ever stayed with the default keyboard layout, feel free to use this. But if Premiere and Resolve editors are anything like Avid editors, then I imagine your keyboard might be, you know, very custom mapped by now. And to map your own keyboard, just double click your active one here. A virtual keyboard will appear. And then you're going to want to go to the Tools menu and bring up the Command palette, which is down here. Or you can use Command 3 to bring this up as its own window. And here you'll have a whole bunch of functions in different tabbed categories that you can drag and drop straight onto this virtual keyboard. So for example, I always have make subclip on my N key. So if I just drag and drop that onto my N key, that's there. And nowadays we have a search function here as well. You can search through all these functions. So if I'm looking for add edit, there it's there. It's under the edit tab. I like to have that on my H key, for example. And you're not limited to your mapping just to what's on the command palette as well. You can select this menu to button reassignment right here, which is quite handy, where you can then click a key, any key, and highlight it. And then with your next selection, find any of the commands in any of these menus, whether it be from the menu bar or from any of these little sub-menus here. And once you select a function, it will map it to that highlighted key. So I'm going to hold Shift right now, and you see it changes when you hold Shift. And then I'll select the E key, and then I'm going to go File, Output, Export to File. Because I like to have my export mapped to Shift E, and now it is. So if I go Shift E, it's going to export my timeline. That's how you would get up and running with customizing your Avid and your keyboard and getting it to look and play how you like it. Definitely something that I recommend that you do. But guys, I think that's enough for one video. I don't know how much I'll be able to trim this down to, but my current record time's at well over an hour, because I do have a tendency to ramble. So I'm going to late park this for now, and we'll come back for another video next week where we'll dive deeper into a particular topic and how Avid deals with that. So you can let me know what you think that should be in the comments. But for now, that's your overview of Avid Media Composer and how things are looking just now. Thank you very much for watching, especially to all the Patreon subscribers. That's always greatly appreciated, guys. I will see you next week in another video. Bye now.